Have you ever found yourself in a group conversation where you talked a lot, explained a lot, but when you walked away, you still felt like your voice did not matter? And maybe you were even looked down on? I have. Back in college, during group meetings, I always tried to talk the most, explain things in the most detail, and convince everyone in every way I could. I thought that by doing so, people would pay more attention to me and respect me more. But no, they still looked at their phones, still had side conversations, and still interrupted me as if I had never said a word. Meanwhile, there was one friend in the group who barely said anything the entire time. And yet, whenever that person finally spoke, the whole group would stop and listen very carefully. So why is it that just through silence, one person can create such a strong presence and make others pay attention to them like that? And how can you become someone who stands out in the same way? Let us find out right now. Why talking too much is not power. From childhood to adulthood, we have been taught, even though no one says it directly, that the person who talks a lot is confident, the person who speaks up is strong, and the person who stays silent is weak or has nothing to say. That belief is planted so deeply in our minds that we no longer even realize it is controlling us. We simply act according to that belief, completely automatically. And that is exactly the problem. Just take a look at what is really happening around you. In arguments on social media, who usually talks the most? Most of the time, it is the person who is the angriest, the person who feels the most threatened, or the person who needs approval from other people. They write long comments, explain themselves over and over again, argue against every single sentence, and in the end, no one wins. Both sides just become more exhausted, while everyone else scrolls past and does not care. Or look at your own workplace. Have you ever noticed that the people who constantly defend themselves or constantly explain their decisions to their boss or coworkers often lose credibility over time? Not because they are wrong. It is because every time they explain, they are accidentally sending out a signal. I am not sure of myself, and I need you to believe me. This is what psychology calls the validation-seeking loop. When you feel doubted or disrespected, the brain's first reaction is to push you to say more, explain more, and prove more. That action may seem natural, but the result often works against you. Because the more you explain, the more you look like someone who is asking for permission to be believed. And that is why people who truly have a voice in a conversation usually do not need to talk too much. They are respected not because they always win with words. It is because deep inside, they have something that helps them stand much stronger than words ever could. And that is the true nature of silence that I want to share with you next. The true nature of silence. Many people think silence simply means saying nothing. It is a blank space, an absence. But in reality, silence is not empty at all. It is a form of presence, an invisible psychological pressure that words may never be able to create. For example, when you are talking to someone, and instead of reacting, they just look at you. Calm, not angry, not explaining, not defending themselves. Just silent. And in that moment, how would you feel? Most people in that situation will begin to talk more. They will try to fill the empty space. They will explain everything from the beginning again. They may even start doubting themselves and wondering whether they said something wrong. And that is exactly what silence is doing for you, without you having to spend a single word. This happens for a reason inside your brain. When we communicate with other people, the brain is always waiting for a response. That is a normal human pattern. Speak, then wait, ask, then listen. But when that response does not come, when the other person simply stays silent, the amygdala in the brain begins to activate. This is the part that processes anxiety and reacts to uncertainty. It immediately raises a series of questions. Why are they not saying anything? What are they thinking about me? Did I just say something wrong? That anxiety creates itself without you having to do anything. And the more anxious the other person becomes, the more likely they are to lose their composure, talk even more. and accidentally reveal the weaknesses they were trying to hide. This also explains why people who tend to control or manipulate others are so afraid when the other person does not react, because their entire power comes from pulling you into their reaction loop, such as anger, explanation, and justification. Once you break that loop with silence, they lose the only tool of control they have, and they begin to collapse from the inside. In short, silence is not passivity. It is a force, but it works in the opposite direction. Instead of attacking the other person with words, you let them attack themselves through their own anxiety and insecurity. Why silence makes you stand out? So why does that very silence make you seem more outstanding in the eyes of the people around you? The reason is that when you stay silent in a tense situation, people around you do not see it as avoidance or weakness. They see it as control. They see someone who is not being led by emotion, someone who is not being pulled into another person's reaction loop, and over time, that creates respect. On top of that, when you do not react in a predictable way, you also gradually become more mysterious. Because the other person does not know what you are thinking, does not know what your next move will be, and things that cannot be predicted are always respected more than things that are easy to read. And while other people are wasting their energy on meaningless arguments, you are preserving all of that strength to put it into things that create real value. Over time, that difference builds up into a very large gap. But to turn that silence into a real weapon, you need to master the strategic steps that help you keep your composure and your voice in real-life situations. The first step is to recognize the moment you are about to be pulled into the trap. For example, you are sitting in a meeting. A coworker looks straight at you and says in front of the whole group, "You did this wrong. Let me redo it." Their tone is a little harsh. Right at that moment, a reaction will usually flare up inside your mind. You want to respond immediately. You want to explain right away. You want to prove that you are not wrong. But that exact moment is the trap. It is not necessarily a trap that the other person intentionally created, because it may be a trap created by your own emotions. If you react immediately while you are upset, you may lose your own composure. And when you lose your composure, even if what you say is right, your words can still lose their weight. So when you feel like you are about to respond out of anger, try pausing for a few seconds, breathing steadily and silently counting to 3. Just a short pause like that can help you escape an emotional reaction and regain control. The second step is to observe, instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. In an argument, most of us think we are listening, but in reality, our mind has already started preparing a response. The other person has only said a few sentences, and you are already thinking, "That is not right. I need to push back on that part later." But when you do that, you miss a lot of important opportunities. If you calmly observe more carefully, you will see that people often reveal their own weaknesses through the way they speak. A person who constantly insists, "I am definitely right," or "no one understands this better than I do," may not always be doing that because they are extremely confident. They may be trying to hide their own insecurity. Or when someone starts speaking faster, raising their voice, and repeating the same point over and over again, that is often a sign that they are losing their composure. And when you recognize that, you will no longer rush into the argument. Because at that point, you are not only hearing what they are saying, you are also seeing the real state behind those words. And once you build the habit of observing all of this, you will always have an advantage over someone who is only eager to respond. The third step is to master the silence. Many people feel very uncomfortable with silence. As soon as the conversation slows down for just a few seconds, they want to say something to fill the empty space. And this is exactly when silence begins to show its power. When the other person finishes speaking, you do not need to rush to answer right away. Let the air go quiet for a moment. That pause is what makes them start wondering, did I just go too far? What is this person thinking? Why are they not reacting? From there, they are more likely to say more, explain more, or adjust their attitude on their own. You are no longer being pulled along by them. You are the one controlling the pace and atmosphere of the conversation. And that is the true power of silence. The fourth step is to replace words with action and results. Silence becomes meaningless if there are no achievements behind it. According to Nietzsche, the superior person is like a fountain. They quietly accumulate value, then burst forward with results that cannot be denied. Instead of explaining how capable you are, let your success create the impact. Instead of making promises, show them your results. Because people may forget what you once said, but it is very hard for them to forget what you actually accomplished. And that is the strongest form of silence. No explanation, no justification, because you use results to make every previous judgment become meaningless on its own. Distinguishing between two types of silence. On the journey of developing true superiority, you need to remember that silence can carry different kinds of power, because in reality, there are two types of silence. One is the cowardly submission of slave morality, and the other is the self-governing authority of master morality. If you are not clear-headed enough to tell the difference, you may be imprisoning yourself in weakness while mistakenly thinking you are building inner strength. Silence out of fear comes from weakness and the fear of being pushed aside. You do not stay silent because you choose to. You stay silent because you do not dare to face conflict. Try to think back. Has there ever been a time after a meeting or an argument when you could only lower your head and tell yourself, "Forget it, I will just let it go. Even if I say something, they probably will not understand, and it will only create more trouble"? That is a sign of retreat. The motive behind this kind of silence is a desperate attempt to maintain a fake sense of harmony. But the price you pay is a soul filled with resentment. Inside you, there is still a storm of frustration, where you keep arguing with the other person in your mind. Why were they so unreasonable? I should have said this. I should have said that. And this kind of silence is like a toxin that slowly makes you lose your identity, until the world eventually steps all over your personal space. Completely opposite to that, silence through self-control is the highest expression of a will to power that has reached maturity. You keep your mouth shut, not because you are afraid of the other person's reaction, but because you realize they are not at a level that deserves the energy it would take for you to explain yourself. When facing a sarcastic remark, instead of getting red in the face and rushing to defend themselves, a superior person often keeps a calm expression. In their mind, there is only one thought. Their world is too small to understand what I am doing, and I have no obligation to expand it for them. This kind of silence comes from an iron belief and absolute certainty in your own value. You know who you are, you know what you are doing, and you do not need any validation or understanding from the outside world to know that you are right. To recognize this thin boundary, look at the feeling that remains after the conversation ends. If you stay silent, but afterward you still feel bitter, still replay the moment again and again, still think about the things you should have said, then that may be silence out of fear. But if you walk away with calmness and relief, no longer being pulled along by the other person's words, then that is silence through self-control. So silence only truly becomes power when it is your choice, not when it comes from fear or resignation. You do not say more because you know it is not necessary. You do not over-explain because you know not everyone deserves your energy. And you do not react in a hurry because you are calm enough to master your own emotions. In the end, becoming superior to others without needing to say a single word is the result of learning how to master yourself. When you no longer rush to explain, when you are no longer pulled into every argument, and when you no longer need anyone's approval to feel valuable, your silence will begin to carry weight. So let others keep making noise to prove themselves. As for you, stay calm, observe, act quietly, and let your results speak for you. Because sometimes the greatest strength is being silent in a way that makes other people look back at themselves. If you still have any concerns or questions related to psychology, communication, or how to master your own emotions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. We will explore and answer them together in the next videos. Goodbye, and I will see you again.